So how did you come to the story in Catch a Fire?
Well, I was having lunch in a Hollywood restaurant also with Bruna Papandreou, who at the time was working for Sidney Pollack and Anthony Minghella, and she told me the story of a film that was then called Hot Stuff, which is the code name of the lead character when he worked for MK, the military wing of the ANC. And she had a big Hollywood handbag, and she pulled the script out, knowing that I was about to undertake a 14-hour journey back to my home country of Australia. And sure enough, by the time the plane landed, I'd read the screenplay and was determined to turn it into a movie. I had made a film a few years ago called Rabbit Proof Fence, which was also a true story, was also a film that was very inspiring in the story that it told. And I thought, well, here's another movie about a real person, an ordinary person, that in a way proves that there's greatness, there's courage in all of us. It just depends on the circumstances.
And what did you think of the character of Patrick Chamusso? Did you know about him in history? Or?
No, Patrick Chamusso was until this film came out. I suppose it's going to change now. But he's just an ordinary person, an unknown. Not one of the heroes of the South African struggle, not a Nelson Mandela or a Desmond Tutu. He's one of the hundreds of thousands of foot soldiers who fought against apartheid. And that fact, the fact that he was an ordinary person, was the real attraction of the story. This was not a man who came from a political family. He had no political leanings, persuasion, enthusiasm. He just wanted his little piece of happiness that he was able to enjoy as a black South African in the apartheid era. Circumstances forced him to take action. We decided to make the film more or less from the closed perspective of the characters. South Africa was a closed society, a very censored one at this time. Maybe that was part of the problem. But Patrick Chamusso wasn't aware of the world stage, just as the character played by Tim Robbins was totally preoccupied with the world around him.
You get fantastic performances from both Derek Luke and Tim Robbins. How did you find them and why did you cast them?
Well, Derek Luke walked into my office in Los Angeles at the end of a 3-month search for someone to play Patrick Chamusso, and 8 minutes later it was clear that there was no one else that I'd seen in those 3 months who came close to the emotional range that he showed. By the time Derek was home at his house in Pasadena, about 35 minutes later, the poor actress who had been hired to stand in and play his wife in one of the key scenes from the movie that you'll see, she was still sobbing, just being in that room and being a part of his performance. The man has an enormous emotional range. I think that the strength that he shows in this performance is that although he goes through this political conversion and becomes a warrior, at all times you feel that this is a reluctant warrior. He would much rather prefer to be back home with his beautiful wife and 2 daughters, but he has to fight back. He has no choice. And Tim Robbins was maybe people might think an unusual choice for such a part. How could you ever expect Tim Robbins to identify with a cop in apartheid South Africa? But when I met him, he immediately showed that he was interested in the same priorities as myself, trying to get behind the mask, trying to dig into the humanity, the things that would drive a man in that position, the fear that would compel him to act as he does. After all, I don't think I've ever met a policeman or a policewoman in my life who ever joined up to do anything but good. But what does it do to the soul of a police officer who's sworn to serve and protect when the laws that he's protecting, the system and the status quo that he's trying to maintain are evil?